Vou repetir. Então, boa tarde a todos. Mais uma vez, agradeço a presença aqui dos alunos do curso de pós-graduação, né, da Unicamp, DE 016, Cinema de Ficção Científica, do Programa de Pós-Graduação em Multimeios, e CS 203, Tópicos Especiais em Modos de Expressão e Conhecimento, do Doutorado em Ciências Sociais, do Instituto de Filosofia e Ciências Humanas da Unicamp. Agradeço, então, a todos os alunos inscritos, presentes aqui nesta aula especial, que conta com um convidado também muito especial, que é o professor Dr. Mariano Paz, da Universidade de Limerick, na Irlanda. Agradeço também aos espectadores, atingimos aqui número de 20, né, participantes neste momento aqui nesta live, nesta aula online, né? Mas provavelmente teremos mais participantes ao longo do tempo. Eu vou então fazer aqui a introdução do professor Mariano Paz, que é nosso convidado para a palestra Cinema de Ficção Científica, ou Ficção Científica do Sul, né, o caso argentino. O professor Mariano Paz leciona na Universidade de Limerick já há muitos anos, e nós temos uma história particularmente especial, porque há muitos anos nos conhecemos, eu por ocasião da minha pesquisa de doutorado, ele provavelmente também. Nós nos encontramos à distância por leituras, e aí viemos a nos encontrar pessoalmente em Manchester, né, em 2006 ou 2007, há muitos anos, há mais de 10 anos, então, somos amigos. Eu acompanho todo o trabalho do professor Mariano Paz com muito entusiasmo, porque eu acho... então, voltei aqui. Agora, imagino que estejam me ouvindo, né? Então, como eu ia dizendo, conheço o professor Mariano Paz obrigado, agora foi. Há mais de 10 anos, e ele é autor de alguns dos textos mais relevantes sobre quem tem interesse em cinema de gênero na América Latina, né, principalmente no Cone Sul. Então, eu dei o exemplo do artigo South of the Future, que é um panorama dos mais refinados a respeito do cinema de ficção científica na América Latina. E, bom, além de outras publicações também, eu devo mencionar o capítulo do professor Mariano Paz no livro Red Alert, né, Marxist Approaches to Science Fiction, que é considerado, inclusive, um dos capítulos mais elogiados, mais interessantes de todo o livro, né, com ênfase nesse cinema de ficção científica do Cone Sul. Eu vou agora traduzir aqui rapidamente um pequeno perfil do professor Mariano Paz, docente pesquisador da Universidade de Limerick, na Irlanda. O interesse do professor Paz é em distopia, né, política e sociedade na cultura popular latino-americana. Em particular, a sua pesquisa também literatura especulativa na cultura argentina, bem como a representação da cidade no cinema latino-americano. Então, o professor Mariano Paz é autor de uma variedade aí de textos e capítulos muito importantes para quem tem interesse sobre o gênero na América Latina e no Cone Sul. E há cerca de 2 anos, inclusive, nós mantemos contato há mais de 10 anos, e há cerca de 2 anos tivemos a felicidade de nos encontrar. Eu fui a convite do professor Mariano Paz à Universidade de Limerick em 2018, estive lá com os alunos dele, Trabalhamos juntos durante cerca de uma semana. Eu agradeço, sou muito grato a esse convite, né? Sempre agradeço, foi um período extremamente produtivo. E o professor Mariano também veio ao Brasil no mesmo ano, mais próximo do final do ano, foi o nosso convidado num encontro do Genecine, o grupo de pesquisa gênero cinematográfico, grupo de estudos sobre gêneros cinematográficos e audiovisuais, que é justamente o grupo de pesquisa. Alguns de vocês aqui presentes são membros do grupo, que é o grupo que organiza esses encontros anuais, e atualmente, em função da pandemia, não temos conseguido fazer os encontros presenciais, mas temos mantido a atividade e a produtividade intelectual trabalhando juntos e fazendo eventos como este evento aqui online. Então, eu agradeço muitíssimo a presença de todos, e especialmente a presença do professor Mariano Paz, que aceitou com muita generosidade e gentileza o convite para nos oferecer esta palestra hoje. Eu vou instruir vocês que, por favor, assistam a palestra do professor Mariano Paz, e ao final haverá uma abertura para perguntas. A palestra será em inglês, mas o professor Mariano é trilingue, né? Fala inglês, português e italiano, mais línguas até, mas essas três eu tenho certeza que ele fala. E ele compreende português também, e ele poderá, então, para a sessão de perguntas e respostas, vocês podem mandar pelo chat, que eu vou organizando aqui, mas vocês podem também, na sessão de perguntas e respostas, fazer as perguntas no idioma da preferência de vocês, dentre essas três línguas, tá? Então, agora eu vou passar para o inglês para introduzir rapidamente o professor Mariano e passar a palavra a ele. So, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for this talk with Professor Mariano Paz from the University of Limerick, Ireland. His talk is entitled Science Fiction from the Global South, the Case of Argentina. So thank you very much, Professor Mariano Paz. And so allow me, please, to introduce Professor Mariano Paz just briefly. Professor Mariano Paz, he is the author of a number of articles and chapters on Latin American cinema, and especially Latin American science fiction fantasy films. So among his book chapters, you can find Rags and Revolution, Visions of the Lumpen Proletariat in Latin American Zombie Films, published in the book called Red Alert, Marxist Approaches to Science Fiction from 2016 by Wayne State University Press. That's one of the best chapters in that book, with a focus on the Latin American zombie films, right? He's also written about films like Mobius and La Sonambula or The Sleepwalker. He also wrote a book chapter published in 2014 called Maradona on the Moon, Post-Colonial Politics and Cultural Hybridity in Argentina's Adiós Querida Luna. It's a very, very interesting film and very interesting chapter about this film, and by Fernando Spiner, same director of La Sonambula. So Professor Mariano Paz is a specialist in Argentinian science fiction cinema and in these filmmakers, right? He's also published articles such as one of the most important ones, and an overview and very, very good, important introduction, one of the best introductions to Latin American science fiction cinema, published in 2008 in the journal called Science Fiction Film and Television, edited by the University of Liverpool University Press. right? So Professor Mariano Paz article from 2008, its title is South of the Future, an overview of Latin American science fiction cinema. So one of the most useful, interesting introductions to the subject. And in 2011, he had an article published in the New Review of Film and Television Studies, and the title is Vox Politica, Acousmatic Voices in Argentine Science Fiction Film. And also in 2013, Professor Mariano Paz had an article published in the journal called Alambique, Revista Académica de Ciencia Ficción y Fantasía, and the title is Buenos Aires Dreaming, Chronopolitics, Memory and Dystopia in La Sonambula. So Professor Mariano Paz, he's a specialist in Argentinian culture and pop culture and film, and of course he's been publishing and doing research on science fiction, Latin American science fiction cinema for a long time. And we first met each other, I think, in 2007 or 8 in Manchester, when both of us, we were doing our PhDs. And since then, we keep contact, regular contact and collaboration, academic collaboration. He invited me to be with him at the University of Limerick for a week or so, and I visited the Ralaheim Center for Utopian Studies, which is a very important center in this field. So Professor Mariano Paz also was invited to come to Brazil about 2 years ago, and then he was a guest speaker in one of our annual encounters of our research group called Genecine, Grupo de Estudos sobre Gêneros Cinematográficos e Audiovisuais. By the way, Genecine is the research group that organizes this event, this online event, this afternoon. So thank you very much, Professor Mariano Paz, for accepting our invitation. Thank you, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. So now I give the word to Professor Mariano Paz. Thank you.
So, well, I want to thank Alfredo. He's not here now, but his introduction was far too kind, okay? Didn't do any justice. I only published a little bit. Gente, entonces, muy buenas tardes. Boas tardes, good afternoon. I'm going to start. I insist. Feel free to interrupt me. Maybe what I'm saying, I don't know, I'm not speaking clearly, or my pronunciation is too heavy, or whatever. And also, if you want me to speak in Spanish, I can do that as well, okay? I can start delivering this talk in Spanish, or a mixture of the languages. I'm from Argentina. I live and teach in Ireland. I did my PhD in the United Kingdom. So I live in these two worlds. You would think that this has led me to become fully bilingual and speak good Spanish and speak good English. Actually, it's the opposite. All my languages have worsened. So I speak a mixture of Spanglish or whatever, okay? But I can try. And also at the moment with the pandemic, I'm in Italy, which is, it lends a very global subtext to this talk. I'm from Argentina. I teach at an Irish university. I'm physically in Italy today, and I'm giving a talk to you who are in Brazil. So I find this very interesting, enabled by technology. So this shows you there is a science fictional side to to our daily lives as well. Yes, this would not have been possible 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, okay? So it's interesting to be conscious of what technological supports we rely on for our daily activities. So the topic well, I hope you can still hear me and see me.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So I was talking about the science fictional underside of this, but as science fiction teaches, everything can go wrong. Everything that has to deal with technology can go very, very wrong. That's one of the lessons we should learn from science fiction as well. So I was being perhaps overly optimistic when I was saying that, okay? But let's not forget the dystopian underside to technology, which is something I want to talk about. So what I was saying is that my aim today is we cannot do a lot. We have about an hour, so just a minor introduction to science fiction from Argentina as a case study that might help you to talk about science fiction elsewhere in Latin America. I think there will be a lot of connections, of points of contact between science fiction from Argentina, from Brazil, from other countries in Latin America, and from other countries in what we can call, whatever you prefer, the global south, underdeveloped countries, peripheral countries, países periféricos, whatever you prefer, okay? So I will start. I insist, this is essential. Feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to turn on your mics and speak over what I'm saying, okay? Interrupt me, not a problem, okay? Alfredo is back. Hey, so I was just thanking Alfredo, your students, for thanking you for your introduction, far too generous, and thanking them for being here. I heard that there's a lot of people, or there's some people at least from Ciencias Sociales, social sciences, and Filosofía, which is great, because if there is something that is connected with science fiction, are those two things, philosophy and social sciences. I know you are almost experts already if you follow the bibliography that Alfredo has given you. I think it's Darko Subin who has said that science fiction is a form of sociology or something like that. And you have Carl Friedman who compares science fiction with critical theory. Critical theory, teoria crítica, in the sense of the Frankfurt School. And for Friedman, science fiction and critical theory have similar uses, to more or less the same thing. So what I was saying is I'm going to go through a very brief introduction. So if there is one useful thing that you can take from my talk, will hopefully be ideas to explore other films or other topics further. Yes, that's my aim. That would be a success if I can get you to get interested in additional films. Yes, no, you will not gain any detailed knowledge or anything from this talk. Just a few pointers. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. Alfredo was saying I'm based in Ireland. We have a research center, un centro de pesquisa, de investigación there, which is called the Ralahain Center for Utopian Studies. If anybody is interested in visiting, let me know. You can write to me. Alfredo was there. We've had 2 or 3 students from Brazil in the past. If you go there on a short research visit, like 2 or 3 months, There is no tuition fee. You don't have to pay anything. Of course, you have to pay for, the transportation and the accommodation, but at least you won't have to pay tuition fees to the university. So that's good. Okay. Alfredo, I'm going to try and share my PowerPoint presentation. And again, let's see if it works. And so this is my presentation. It may be untidy. I may go in and out. If I can show clips from films, it would be ideal. But again, technology will let us know if it's possible or not to do this. Okay. Also, when I present, I stop seeing cameras and faces and everything. So yeah, if you fall asleep, snore, okay? So I can know what's happening. I welcome that. And if something happens like with Alfredo, my voice is lost or something, yeah, speak up and let me know. Don't be shy, okay? All right. So going back to my presentation, hopefully you can see this, okay? And let's start. Enough palabrerío, enough words for the time being. The first thing that we need to think about, and you already know, is that science fiction exists outside of the North, exists outside the tradition of British and North American literature and cinema. Okay, so we know that it exists, and it exists in South America or Latin America. Okay, although it's problematic. It's problematic for a number of reasons. To define, I won't go into definitions, but it's problematic to define some texts as Latin American and as science fiction for a number of reasons. Pablo Capana is one of the pioneers from Argentina who, in terms of science fiction research and research into science fiction, and he said that Latin American SF is a genre, a science fiction that resists recognizing itself as such. So it is science fiction, but it does not recognize itself as science fiction. And why not? Well, for a variety of reasons, which I'm sure that you would be familiar with some of them. Some of them are simply commercial. There is this idea that if you categorize yourself as a science fiction writer, then your audience, your readers would be reduced. You are appealing to a narrower segment of the population that reads literature or watches film, that it's already a narrow one. Yes. There are political reasons, again, the diversa índole, diverse political reasons. Some of them could be related to, I don't know, a view that if you write science fiction, you are the subject of an imposed genre. So it's something that has to do with cultural imperialism. No, I cannot write science fiction because it's an American genre, for example. And there are also the aesthetic reasons, which I'm sure you know about. It is changing. It has changed a lot. What I'm talking about is this idea that science fiction is a popular genre, and as such, it's a lower, yes, form of literature. You're probably familiar with the term pulp fiction, no? This idea of cheap, second-rate literature, okay? And there is that idea then that if you write science fiction, you cannot be a serious author, okay? You are at the margins of literary production. Does this make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks. Okay. So there is a bit of that, a disavowal, no, a denial. If what I'm doing is science fiction, I better not be too open about it. Let's not underline that. But the other thing, this is within Latin America. Outside of Latin America, the science fiction produced in Latin America has been ignored. It tends to be ignored for a number of reasons. First of all, expectations. You know, we don't associate science and technology with Latin America. Indeed, the stereotype is that Latin America is this primitive, you know, backward region that does not produce scientific research, does not produce technology. Obviously, to an extent, that is true, yes. The technological production and the scientific production in Latin America is not as extended as that of other countries, okay? But there is this idea that science fiction does not fit Latin America as, for example, a genre like magical realism, no? Realismo mágico. Thus, the realismo mágico, we have all this focus on the exotic elements that make up Latin America. And that has, you know, gone down very well with audiences in the United States and in Europe. Don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against magical realism. I'm a fan of Garcia Marquez and all these traditions, yes. But it's not science fiction, and at the same time, yes, it's the genre that, as you know, within the fantastic, within non-naturalistic production, has sort of identified Latin America. So there is this expectation and stereotypes about Latin American identity made elsewhere that science fiction is not responding to, not engaging with. Okay. So I'm talking, of course, in general. I will talk later about film, which is my area. Okay, but there are the roots. Film, science fiction cinema has not emerged out of nowhere. Okay, it emerges out of a literary tradition, which in Argentina is a very, very strong literary tradition. Okay, there is a lot of writers in Argentina that have written works that can be described as science fictional. Okay, here you have one of the earliest ones, El viaje maravilloso del señor Nick Nack. Okay, and it's about somebody who manages to travel to Mars. Okay, and the book was published in 1875. I don't know if you can mark this out, but it's a 5. So 1875, okay? And the author is Eduardo Holmberg, who was a scientist as well as a writer, okay? It's an exotic text, but my point here is that there is this deep root of science fiction cultural production in Argentina, which is related also to a highbrow or canonical take on literature, okay? What do I mean by canonical or highbrow? That it wasn't pulp fiction, that it wasn't, you know, popular writers, genre writers, as we could think of some, you know, American practitioners, you know, Isaac Asimov, or Robert Heinlein, or whatever, okay? These were serious, highly renowned writers with a reputation. The most notable examples would be Jorge Luis Borges and Adolfo Bioy Casares, okay? I don't know if you've heard of these names. I have 2 versions of the cover of Ficciones because this is one of the quintessential texts. And then we have Adolfo Bioy Casares with the most important book would be La Invención de Morel, okay? Having said this, bear in mind that we are talking of science fiction here. Again, you read a lot about this, from what I've seen from the reading lists that Alfredo has given you, which, by the way, are excellent. They contain the essential works of science fiction criticism. So anyway, what I'm saying is these works are, or we can say they are science fiction if we understand this in a loose way. Okay, science fiction as soft science fiction, as a form of the genre that is based more on speculation than on hard science. Okay, in some cases there are important technological apparatuses or things like that, like in the Invención de Morel, for example, which is a novel from 1940. We have an inventor, Morel, who's invented some kind of holographic 3D recording, okay? So 3D cinema, okay? That is projected, and you have, human beings in 3 dimensions, size ratio 1:1, so that if you see those images, you don't know if they are recorded or if they are real. But apart from that, mostly it avoids this kind of technological imagination, the science fiction, and it's focused on speculation. So yes, there's a strong tradition of science fiction also in graphic novels, like El Eternauta here. This one would be the main one, which has also been very strong. And perhaps you've heard of El Eternauta. If you haven't, I recommend it very strongly as a graphic novel. And then there are more contemporary ones, like these ones by Diego Agrimbau, who also wrote El Humano. Okay, I insist then soft science fiction, speculative science fiction. You've read about this already. I know that you discussed the definitions of science fiction. Okay, so here we may have to forget about subbing, okay, and be less restrictive. But you also know that genres fluctuate, that genres are not solid categories, the lines are blurred, etc. I hope I am still making sense. If I am not, I hope that you'll let me know, okay? So from this basis, from this structure, or these foundations of science fiction production in literature and in graphic novel, yes, we finally arrive at a film, science fiction film produced in Argentina. As I said, I'm going to try to compare these works with films that have been produced elsewhere, because there's always a dialogue, okay? There is an element of hybridity in science fiction. We know that science fiction emerged in most likely in English literature, okay? By English, I mean English language. I know that some people trace, text of science fiction to the Greeks or whatever, but I'd rather be a little bit more restrictive, if not completely Slovenian, okay? Science fiction for me starts with Frankenstein, okay? Which is already a hybrid of Gothic and Gothic and science fiction, but anyway, okay? I've lost my train of thought, but I think I was saying that science fiction cinema in Argentina emerges out of this tradition, combining the elements of a genre which has been produced elsewhere in Europe, in the US, with some more local elements, even if sometimes that's in the negative sense. For example, lack of a film industry, lack of financial resources to produce film, that conditioned the field of Latin American cinematic production in Argentina. Is it okay? Should I continue in English? You let me know, okay?
Up to you, Mariano.
No, I'm a populist. I want to do whatever the people tells me to do.
Great.
No, I don't want to impose a language. Portuguese, unfortunately, I do not speak, but I could turn into Spanish, which is closer to Portuguese. I don't know. For all I know, you're all excellent speakers, or for all I know, my accent means that you can understand for whatever reason. But if you prefer that I speak in Spanish, or if I'm speaking too fast, let me know. Okay, let me know. To be honest, I'm used to teaching these topics in English, but it's supposed to be my native language, Spanish. Okay. So there's not much to say of early Argentinian science fiction cinema. Literature, yes, it started in 1875. Some people would have it even earlier, 1816, things like that. But as I said, maybe that's a bit pushing it a little bit too far, okay? But in any case, very early, 1875, this is when the Argentina as a nation was being born, okay? Yes, the country had been independent since 1810, but only in the late, the last part of the 19th century was it becoming a proper, a modern nation state, okay? But with cinema, we don't have that. It started much later. There are some examples from the 30s, from the 40s, but I would say that the most important science fiction film to be produced in Argentina, the first one, I mean, among the canonical works, is this one, which is called Invasión. And in the history of cinema, it was made rather late, okay? Because in a way, I am saying that there is not much, not many interesting works of science fiction cinema made in Argentina until this one. So that's over 70 years of film history. And films were produced in Argentina very early as well, okay, in the 19th century. There are some, but as I said, they are not that interesting. Although maybe there is some unknown work that will emerge at some point. The other thing about Argentina is that the preservation of films is very poor, and many films from the silent era and from the 30s, from the 40s have been lost. So you can see there, first the date. The film is from 1969. And also, it's based on a story by Borges and Bioy Casares, who I've just mentioned as two of the most important science fiction writers from Argentina. By the way, if you've said this to Borges, he would probably said, no, I'm not saying that he was a science fiction writer, but some of his stories can certainly be classified as science fiction if you understand SF, as I said, in a softer way of speculative fiction. Okay, close to the fantastic. Very briefly, I'm not going to show a clip because I'm afraid of technology, but this is a film that is set in a fictional Buenos Aires called Aquilea, and the city is on the verge of a foreign invasion. It's not an alien invasion. There's no creatures. If we go back to the definition by Darko Subin, in which he says science fiction as a combination, you will remember, of estrangement and cognition. The estrangement part, the fantastical part, the non-realistic part in this film is very subtle, okay, subtle. we have a foreign invasion, apparently foreign, because the invaders speak Argentinian Spanish with an Argentinian accent. But anyway, they are planning an invasion of the city, and there's a group of people, only a handful of people, who are resisting that invasion, okay, who want to repel it, wants to push back those invaders, okay? Who are the invaders? We don't know. What do they want exactly? We don't know, but probably take over the city, gain political and or economic and or cultural control of that city, okay? But not much is known. There's nothing science fictional about the film if we focus on the visual dimension, the imaginaries of the film, okay? What the film is showing visually, there's nothing science fictional there. There's no, props. There is no settings that are science fictional, okay? So I mean, no technological element that does not exist at the time in which the film is made. I insist, interrupt me if you feel like it, okay? So if you see, the film takes place in a city that is not Buenos Aires, but everybody knows it's Buenos Aires. There's nothing that is not contemporary. These are a few shots. This is the Buenos Aires of the 1960s. Okay, nothing out of the ordinary. I will compare this to other films that follow this premise. For example, Alphaville by Jean-Luc Godard. Okay, but anyway, this group of people just goes about their lives, and when they get information that this group of invaders is trying to join the city, just go there and try to repel them through violence. Okay, they have guns, but none of them is an expert soldier or anything. They are ordinary people engaged in a task of, armed struggle against the invaders. They are outnumbered. They are not particularly supported or funded by the government of the city. Everybody seems to ignore that this invasion is going on. Everybody goes about their business. Everybody is ignorant of this. But apparently for this group of people, it's important to prevent this invasion. So globally, can we connect this film to other SF works, to another tradition? Well, I don't know if you're familiar with this film, with Alphaville, a French film, which also is supposed to set in a futuristic or alternative world. Alphaville, it's a world, but it just looks like Paris, in the 1965. Okay, it's Paris. Okay, of course, it's a film from Godard, so it has its own intricacies in terms of plot. But look at the similarities between, for example, Lemmy Caution, the detective who is the star in Alphaville, and the Reda, who is the protagonist of Invasion. They look quite similar, don't they? What do you say? The photography, the high contrast lighting. The director of Invasion worked in France, by the way. He's an Argentinian director, but he had moved to France and worked as an assistant director to Robert Bresson. So it's not too strange that it was influenced by Godard. Okay. Why do I mention this? Because again, I want to insist on a version of science fiction that is speculative. We don't have much in terms of spectacle here. We don't have much in terms of technology or sophisticated technology. that inform so many plots of science fiction cinema, let alone we have aliens or things like that. Does this make sense? It's a more intellectual version of science fiction. It's more speculative. I've said that already. Softer, if you want to use that distinction between soft and hard science fiction. Hard science fiction is that is based on strict, hard scientific facts. There's nothing really about science in this film, and not a lot, but some about technology. It's more about conveying this idea of an alternative reality, a novum, if you wish, and something that is estranged. It's not realistic, but it's still cognitive. There is no science, but there is cognition. Cognition in the sense of logic. We don't have any spirits. We don't have anything that could be ascribed to magical realism here. Okay, and a little bit. Well, the same thing happens in Alphabet. Okay. What else can I say about this film? It's a film de vanguardia. Okay, aesthetically and politically, avant-garde. Aesthetically, again, I've compared it to Godard. The plot is linear, but nothing much happens in the film, apart from these scenes in which the protagonists are fighting the invaders. But nothing seems to change much. Eventually, they are defeated and everybody is killed. But the film finishes with a new. Well, the invasion is completed. These foreigners, or sorry, strangers, or whatever they are, enter the city. Apparently, they take over things, and an underground resistance is formed. Okay, but the difference is that this resistance is made up completely of younger people who are in their 20s, whereas Herrera there is somebody in his late 40s or 50s, probably. Okay, so the Argentinian critic Gonzalo Aguilar speaks of this film in an essay titled La Salvación por la Violencia. There is this idea that violence is the answer to solving the problems that are put forward in this imagined reality. Okay, and of course, 1969, it was a year of youth movements, of unrest. You have, all the riots and the violence of El Mayo Francés. So May 1968 in France, but you also have similar movements in the Czech Republic and in Argentina, in Mexico, Tlatelolco in 1968. In Argentina, you had El Cordobazo, student riots in 1969, etc. So this idea of armed struggle and clandestine operations that were going to be made against those in power, it's very present in the film. Retrospectively, you could say that it predicted the violence that would characterize Argentina in the 70s, and also the resistance, the terrorist resistance to the dictatorship by the group Montoneros, the Peronist group Montoneros. I'm going quickly over this. It's a little bit too specific. I can expand anything if you want. Okay, too specific. I mean historically specific in relation to the case of Argentina. So I don't want to go too much into this. I think this film can also be connected to a film that I know from Alfredo. Here we have Herrera captured by the invaders. The only way we can distinguish the heroes from the villains is that the heroes wear a dark suit and the bad guys, the invaders, light colored suit. So it's not quite white, but it's beige, something like that, okay? This looks out of date for us, but it would have been very modern in the 1969 in Argentina. This set of 3 televisions, 3 TV sets all together. We have telephones. We have a typewriter here on the margin of the frame. All of these points towards the maybe technological superiority of the invaders, the bad guys. Herrera, the main character here, is a captive of the bad guys, who certainly rely on communications technology to carry out this invasion. What I was saying is that this film can be connected to a film from Brazil, which I know thanks to Alfredo. It's called O Quinto Poder. I don't know if anybody has seen this film. Alfredo has. Anybody else?
Actually, they're gonna see it like in a few weeks or so. Yeah, yeah. Some of them, Gabriel, yeah, he saw everything. But yeah, in a few weeks, and we're gonna talk about this film. Yeah.
Right. So, well, you can think back once you watch it to what I've said, because here it's also talking about an invasion, about somebody invading. The main difference between O Quinto Poder and Invasión is that in this film, O Quinto Poder, it's very clear that the place where the invasion happens is Brazil. It's Rio. And it's also very clear that the invaders are foreigners, that they speak English or they speak German. Whereas in Invasión, they all speak Spanish. Not just Spanish, they speak Spanish with an Argentinian accent. And the city is Buenos Aires, thinly veiled, but it's not supposed to be Buenos Aires in the film's plot. But you will see how it shares an emphasis on communications. The main aim of the invaders is to hack the media, and that's the way they will manage to subject the population. Okay, O Quinto Poder, it's more science fictional in the sense that they have a technology that will disrupt human conscience. Okay, Quinto Poder is early. It was released in the early 60s. Okay, whereas Invasión is from the late 60s. But I think they are both informed by similar ideas about, well, the idea of the invasion. Again, it's the 60s. It's the time of the Cuban Revolution in Latin America, of these divided world or world visions. Yes, the United States was a lot more interested in Latin America at the time, and so on. So there may have been, I don't know, more prevalent anxieties about an invasion, okay, and about the idea to protect what is national and local. Sorry, these are stills from the film, from Invasión, but this is the ending. This is the youth resistance forming up, training in clandestine camps. So this is clearly an allusion. I'm tempted to say a prediction of what was going to happen in Argentina with left-wing groups that literally engaged in what was called lucha armada. Yes, lucha armada, armed struggle against a series of governments in Argentina. Not all, but most of them dictatorial, dictatorships. Any questions? so far, or we want to leave that for the end, Alfredo? We'll leave them for the end.
Yeah, let's
continue.
do it. We open for questions in Spanish after your.
Yeah, I want to jump ahead. I don't want my talk to be an enumeration of films. So as I said, I'm mentioning essential landmark films. Okay, so let's jump ahead to this film, La Sonámbula, The Sleepwalker, because here we are in the terrain of a more obvious work of science fiction. Okay, first of all, the film is set in the year 2010, which times go by very fast. That was 10 years ago, but the film was made in 1998. So 2010 was the future at the time in which the film was made. We have once more the element of canonical, of highbrow literature through the screenwriter Ricardo Piglia. Piglia is one of the most prestigious writers in Argentina. He's from a different generation than Borges and Bioy Casares. He died only a few years ago. He was born in 1940, I think, or something like that. Okay. So again, we have, we can trace it back to a literary origin. Okay, like Invasion. But we are in the terrain of a science fiction film that portrays a future society. And also we are into another terrain that is very, very connected with the science fiction imagination, and in particular with science fiction as a film genre. Okay, you have it in literature, but it's much closer in cinema, which is the dystopia. Okay. Science fiction and dystopia are very closely connected, as you know, particularly in film. Okay, and this film is set in Argentina, as I said, 12 years into the future. The coordinates, geographical, spatial, are very clear. Now they are about. It's not a fictional city. It is Buenos Aires. It is a Buenos Aires living under a totalitarian government, a dictatorship. Okay, and in this world, in 2010, there's also has been an accident. It's an industrial accident in Buenos Aires, in a factory that caused the release of toxic gases. I mentioned this film in that article very briefly, that Alfredo mentioned. And people who were exposed to those toxic gases have had their memories completely wiped out. Yes, they've lost their memories. And I mean this at its most literal, okay? They don't remember anything at all. Tabula rasa, okay? So these are two very clear science fictional premises. No, the issue of memory, you have it in a wide range of science fiction films. Blade Runner, yes, is perhaps one of the most important, but we could spend 10 minutes coming up with examples of science fiction films in which the manipulation of memory is an issue, okay? I'm thinking of Total Recall as well, but there are a lot. So that's one premise. The other premise is the dystopian futuristic society in which people live in a dictatorship. Can we try and see if we can watch a film clip? What do you think, Alfredo? Should we be brave and Utopia.
So.
Well, okay.
Yeah,
okay. So I'll show you a few minutes so you have an idea of how the film looks, because as I was saying, it's more science fictional, but it's also a speculative film. It's also a film with a relatively low budget, with special effects that retrospectively do not look great. They looked better in 1998, but even then they were not the best. Okay, so let's see if this works. So I'm going to share. No. I'm not getting an option.
If you choose like present now, and then you have to select like the window or the tag.
Yeah, but yeah, and in the menu of option, I only have the slides. I have Google Chrome, but I don't have my Windows Media Player, which I have open.
You have to can you open the, because you have to get it open like before, and then maybe it appears as an option.
I'll share I can share my whole screen. I'll do that. Yeah. I don't have anything compromising open. Nothing that you shouldn't look at.
Okay.
So let's see.
Let's go.
No, sorry. It doesn't let me. Okay. A window. No, I don't have an option to add anything. Could it be because I am not the organizer of this or something? Alfredo, what do you think?
I don't think so. Actually, I think you are. If you showed us your slides, so actually I think in theory you'll be able to choose the browser or the VLC or Windows Media Player. Can you?
Let's see. I think I'm sharing everything with you at the moment. Yeah. Am I sharing anything?
Yeah.
Okay. I have La Sonambula here. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see if it works. Okay. I want to show you 2 or 3 minutes of film. Let me know if it's not working.
There is no sound, Mariano. There is no sound.
Okay. So, Alfredo, let's go with the images if there's no sound. What's happening is that the man is saying, he's asking the woman who she is, what's her name. She doesn't remember anything. And that's all, okay? It's mostly music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the quality of what you're saying is. I hope it's good, but I don't know exactly what it is that you're saying.
The image is all right. The image is okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It did.
No dialogue. You're missing the music. You're missing out on the music, but. There's no dialogue at all here, so it's just, you can look at the way the film is designed, have a sense of the visual effects of the film.
Man.
And you have the dystopian cityscape, which is a staple of science fiction. Okay, the dystopian cityscape, which and that's it. So I'll stop that, and I'll go back. Sorry about the. The shifting, but I don't think there was any other way of doing this. And I'll go back to my PowerPoint. So what you saw there is the beginning of the film, in which this person, the main character, Eva, who's lost her memories, is detained. She's not going to be killed or anything, but the way in which she's detained and taken to a center mirrors a practice that was very extended in Argentina in the 70s, in the dictatorship, which is clandestine, undercover police forces or the army kidnapping people on the streets. Kidnapping who? Dissidents, people who were against the government. In some cases, they could have been militants. In other cases, they were just people who expressed an opinion against the government. Okay, so the film is mirroring this. In a way, it's saying that this that happened in Argentina in the 70s was going to happen again in 2010. Okay, this happened in the 90s, a period of neoliberal reforms, a period in which the military, the responsible for the dictatorships, the military junta who had ruled Argentina between 76 and 1983, responsible for the murder of 30,000 people, had been pardoned. They had been convicted after the dictatorship ended in the 80s, and then in the 90s, the president issued a pardon, un indulto. And all these people, genocides, literally, were released from jail, okay? So here we see a concern about history repeating itself, a very clear concern that could happen. We have this play with the issue of memory, okay? We have these highways, again, that completely change the image of Buenos Aires. It's a dystopian Buenos Aires. You can trace this back to Metropolis, the German film from 1926, which I'm sure you all know about. You could trace it to a number of highways. These actually exist that were built during the military dictatorship. Yes, this was a major urban redesign, but it involved destroying, buildings. Many of them were colonial, very valuable buildings in terms of architecture, historically. So there is an issue of ignoring history. When you destroy a historic building, you're kind of wiping out history, which is the same thing that happens when you wipe out somebody's memories. You know, your sense of history disappears. Hopefully this makes sense. During the dictatorship, the government planned to build 8 highway networks crisscrossing Buenos Aires. Eventually, only 2 were built, and then the regime ended. But perhaps this is what Buenos Aires would look like if they had continued, okay? And they disappeared, I mentioned this, they disappeared. The people who were the victims of the dictatorship are referenced in the film through those who lost their memories. Okay, they haven't been killed, but their memories have been erased, okay? They are referred through an euphemism, un eufemismo, afectados, affected. They've been affected. They don't have any memories. Now, technically, if you have somebody who's lost their memories, that person does not know where he's living, where she lives, where she works, who she is. So you need to put them somewhere. And they put them in a place which is almost a prison. They are not free to go out when they want, etc. So there is an allusion, there is a parallel between disappeared people who lost their memories in the film. So again, closer to hard science fiction, closer to dystopia. There are other technological elements. If you're interested, you can watch the film. It gets more complicated. I'm simplifying things a lot here, but I'm conscious of time. So no sound when I share the clip. There is no sound.
No, there was no sound.
Okay. I have no explanation for that. But
maybe turn off your phone, your earplug.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, maybe if you turn off your headset, then maybe we can hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Although you would hear it through the mic, I thought. Yeah. But yeah. That makes sense. Thank you. There's a person who is wise with technology. So thank you for that suggestion. Yes, who can navigate the science fictional scenarios that technology proposes. Let me jump ahead to a final film, which is kind of the exception here, the film that is out of the norm in this sample of films that are low budget and followed and modeled on a speculative forms of science fiction. Here we have a very low budget film, but it takes place, it's set in outer space. It's called Adiós, Querida Luna, Goodbye, Dear Moon. It's a film from 2003. By the way, it's the same director in La Sonambula and in this one. So he's an expert in science fiction. These are the 2 films he's rated 2 SF films, but that makes him an expert for Argentinian standards. So the film is about a mission that Argentina launches to destroy the moon, okay? The premise is that, well, the film is set in the year, I can't remember exactly, but it's 2050 or something, so it's far into the future. And the world, planet Earth, is almost destroyed through the effects of climate change. And there is an Argentinian scientist who comes up with the idea, the theory, that the cause, the reason for the climate being what it is, a disaster, it's not, global warming, pollution, it's the gravitational pull of the moon. The gravitational pull that the moon exerts on the Earth is responsible for climate change. And the theory posits that if the moon disappears, then the axis of the Earth will change, it will rotate, and then climate will revert back to being, benign and nice and beautiful. Okay, I hope this makes sense. That's the plot. It's wild. Nobody believes in it in the international community except for the Argentinian government. The Argentinian government thinks that the theory is true, whereas the scientific community completely rejects it. So what does the national government do? They send a mission to destroy the moon. Why? Because they realize that if Argentina is finally successful and the country manages to resolve the problems that have arisen out of climate change, then Argentina would be, a hero in the world order. The country will become, a hero and recognized over the world and given priority, economic priority by all world global organizations and so on. So I'm going to turn on my headset and hear me through the computer mic, and I'll show you a clip from the film. So I stop sharing this. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's see if this works. This is a scene from early in the film. Remember, we have this Argentinian mission, a spaceship sent out to destroy the moon. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Mariano, it's too low. It's too low and out of sync, but we can hear something.
You cannot?
Yeah, actually, it's too low and out of sync, but we can hear something like that bueno and some words.
It's only jargon, okay? So just one more minute.
All right.
So it's mostly a countdown. I think that is enough. More interested than the dialogue, which of course would be better to have. I wanted to have an idea of how these films look, okay? Because what you have there is the traditional technological jargon. You have a countdown, you know, things about coordinates, fire, you know, that kind of thing, okay? But you have an idea of, it's better. At least you know how the film looked. As I said, it's a low-budget film, but I think it stands its ground when it comes to the visual design. Remember, it's from 2003 as well. Yeah, so that's 17 years ago. Okay. So I go back to my PowerPoint. This film, in a way, sort of undermines what I was saying earlier about films being more focused on speculation, little in terms of spectacle. I won't go into the adventures. Obviously, the mission is a complete failure. The moon is not destroyed. The astronauts are visited by an alien in human form. He looks like a tango singer, traditional porteño citizen of Buenos Aires, you know, from the 40s. Here you have the Virgen de Luján in the spaceship. So the film is playing humorously with the conventions of the, you know, space adventure, not quite a space opera, but certainly space adventure film, and the conventions of, you know, local Argentinian icons and nationalities. It goes as far as showing the astronauts when they want to they need recreation, they start playing games. In 2001, you have them playing chess. In Star Wars, they play this kind of holographic game, if you remember. In this film, they play with a sort of holographic video game of Maradona, yeah, so some kind of holographic football. So there you have, again, a combination of the international and the local references, yes, together. I'm jumping over some slides because I'm conscious of the time. But the main idea is that, okay, that the mission is a failure, that the driving force behind these missions is a sense of inequality and an equal distribution of power in the world. But at the same time, there is this desire of Argentina to show the world, oh, we can do it. We can save the planet through technology, through our own, you know, techno-scientific developments. But of course, it doesn't work. No local audience would believe that the Argentinian government would be capable of such a feat. In fact, the film ends very badly. The film is like a science fiction comedy, okay? It doesn't take itself too seriously at the same time. But it ends with the international community finding out that Argentina has sent this mission. So the local government denies it, okay? It says, no, this never happened. And they destroy the ship. That spaceship you've just seen, a missile is fired, the ship is destroyed, and the government denies it ever existed. So you have, again, the idea of wiping out history and wiping out the people who are inconvenient for the government. Yes, in La Sonambula, the sleepwalker, they are wiping out people's memories. Here they are destroying, you know, those astronauts and denying they ever existed, and there's no trace. You know, the missile has obliterated the ship, so there's no trace. Okay. The references to Maradona are inscribed within this tension between the national and the international. Yes, Maradona is a symbol of Argentina standing up to the world, particularly through 2 goals that Maradona scored against England in the 1986 World Cup, which is a revenge, yes, against the English especially in the aftermath of the Guerra de Malvinas, the Falklands War. But it's also, again, Argentina imposing itself metaphorically, of course, symbolically, because this is football. This is not a war. This is not the international, stage. This is not Argentina solving climate change, but at least it's a symbol. Okay. So I'll finish here, so we have time for questions. What do you say?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much, Mariano. And I think Luis Fernando put on the chat, La mano de Dios.
La mano de Dios, indeed, because there's an even, an additional thing, which is Maradona beating the English, in part through skill, but in part through some kind of, it's illegal, no, it's an illegal move, but it's also an astute move, because Maradona is doing this in a way that nobody can realize, so he's manipulating the rules in his favor. Yes, it's not entirely legal, but it's something that you need some skill to do right, which Maradona has, okay? I'm not trying to justify anything here, but it involves a skill. You could say it also involves some kind of morality as well, if you wish. Fair enough. We can discuss that. Let me see if I can go back to my headphones, because I prefer this. But if not,
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Mariano?
I can.
Okay, good. So thank you very, very much. It's wow, a sounding great, fascinating talk on
Don't be too generous.
Oh, come on. They were I know films, right? Because we've been friends for a long time. So I know all these films. Probably Gabriel saw some Invasión, also the others, but they are key films in the history of Argentine sci-fi. SF, or science fiction cinema.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's switch to Portuguese or Spanish and open for questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to take questions in Portuguese. If you don't speak quickly, I'll manage.
Yeah, either Portuguese or Spanish.
Whatever, yeah.
It's now open for questions. Vocês podem escrever, falar, por favor, abram os microfones e as câmeras. E podem perguntar diretamente ao professor Mariano. Eu tenho várias perguntas. Sim, claro, Luísa. Por favor. Pode perguntar, Luísa.
Don't forget to unmute yourselves, because that happens with my students often.
Pode perguntar, Luísa. Mas tem que abrir o microfone.
I don't know how to do this with this, because I have my cats and they're trouble guys. Okay, my question is not about only Argentinian science fiction, no, but about Latin American genre, the study of Latin American genre. I have studied crime narratives in Brazil and Argentina, and I use also Canclini concepts of hybridity. But even today, I have a doubt, no, a real one, is when you try, I decided to adopt crime narrative instead cop narrative, because I was in search of a Latin American genre, no?
Yeah.
Not only mirrored in the US shows and films. But my question is, when we start for science fiction, crime narratives, how could I avoid the stereotype to reinforce the Hollywoodian stereotype or genre? Because it's the dominant.
Yeah, could you say, how could you avoid? What did you say after avoid?
The stereotypes, the Hollywoodian genre.
Yeah.
Because they have a tradition in science fiction, in crime narratives, noir, no?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. But I don't think there's no escape. But these films dialogue in a way with the templates set by American cinema. In some ways, they are undermined, they are questioned. Certainly, Godard does that all the time. It's not a Latin American example, but it's one I use, and Godard is very conscious that he's doing this, undermining those genres. He takes some of the conventions, he takes some of the tropes of those genres, and then he undermines them. I suppose it would depend on the text, because some films, there's a lot of films that are just cheap copies of Latin American films, which I'm not using because they're not, they are not that interesting here. So I try to come up with those that are a little bit more challenging or a little bit more interesting. But there's no escape. Film noir is a genre that emerged in the US, no? So how can you avoid it? I don't think you could. I'm not sure to what extent. Yes, I agree about Canclini and these theories of hybridity, but I'm not sure to what extent this could be avoided elsewhere. Anytime you're working with genre, you have these difficulties. How to define a genre, and how the genre is put in practice. And also, a genre is not just the audience, it's not just the producers, but it involves publishers, the markets, the way it is marketed, commercialized, etc. I think so. What you're doing, you're conscious of it, just be conscious of those relations, and that's it.
No,
but maybe other people have better ideas.
I have a question, and it's about, you mentioned Bioy Casares, Silvino Campo, Borges at the beginning of your talk. Then my question, Mariano, I wonder if when we talk about science fiction literature, in general, literary criticism and people in general, they think of literature in English, and then you have like hard and soft science fiction. You have like soft science fiction in speculative science fiction, and in English it's all right. But whenever you have this kind of literature in other language, like Spanish or Portuguese or whatever, then it's magical realism, or it's so what do you think about this? Because I see Bioy Casares, Silvino Campo, Borges, and others as in Brazil, some authors too. I see them as sometimes science fiction writers too. They wrote science fiction, like but soft science fiction, whatever. But it's interesting because don't you think that it's some sort of how would I say? There is soft science fiction when it is in English. When it's in other language, then it's something else. What do you think about that?
No, I agree. But there's the element of stereotypes and the expectations. So no, science fiction cannot come from Latin America. So absolutely, it's easier to categorize something as realismo mágico, and that's it. But there is also an element, realismo mágico emphasizes this idea of exoticism, that foreigners love, no, to ascribe to Latin America. It's exotic, it's weird. So Realismo Mágico caters to that. I'm being recorded, so I don't want to criticize any specific authors, but I'm a fan of Garcia Marquez. I'm not so keen on a writer like Isabel Allende, which I think it's a lot better at navigating the expectations of the English language market and catering to those expectations. This is what they ask, so I'm going to play along, and this will mean that any writer that I will have an audience as well. So maybe we Latin American producers, play into that as well a little bit in terms of literature. You also need to remember that many writers don't want to be categorized as science fiction, because then the chances of finding their own market may decrease. Maybe they want to be translated, and that's also playing a role there. But there is also a good deal of cultural imperialism, I assume there. No, science fiction is Hollywood cinema. But you could probably say that of other films, of Spanish science fiction, of Italian science fiction, of French science fiction. That tends to be relegated as well. No?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Perguntas? Hein? Podem abrir os microfones e perguntar diretamente.
Yeah, or at least snore, which is what I said.
Yeah,
no? Sleep, snore, so we know, and we won't ask you. Oh, you're asleep.
Luis Felipe has a question. Yeah,
yes.
Come on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a little bit of trouble with my mic. I have a couple questions, actually. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Mariano. Many thanks for this presentation.
Nothing to thank.
And I would like to ask about the uses of word systems theory on the study of genre formations. Andrew Milner in Locating Science Fiction, Jerry Mathai in Keeping Count of the End of the Word, and to some extent, Franco Moretti in Planet Hollywood made use of word systems theory in their studies regarding SF as well. One might say that this theory could be an important tool for SF studies in general. Could you explain a little more, or maybe point out some other references about your research within this theory for South of the Future? And
I don't make any mentions to world systems theory. No, to be honest, no, I'm not sure what to say, because I'm not an expert on theory. I struggle all the time as to how to place, countries like Argentina and Brazil in the world. Even in this talk, I'm not sure how I should be referring to Argentina. Is it a peripheral country? If we stick to that terminology of core and periphery, maybe. Argentina is also in the G20, the group of 20 most advanced or developed countries, which is a contradiction, I think, particularly if you look at the state of the Argentinian economy at present. No, I don't think I can answer that. I think it's more, I'm very skeptical of, increasingly skeptical of these when we are working with genre, of any kind of prescriptive theory that has pre-established models that you impose on text. Because then when you start looking at those texts, they are very elusive. Even defining science fiction is a problem. No, it's increasingly more and more difficult, as we know. So I think it's about, I don't think you can arrive at some kind of pre-established theoretical model that will work for all cases. if you want to either establish hierarchies or relations. But at the same time, I agree. I also disagree with those theories that put forward that all the centers of production of cinema are equal. There's not a center. There's many centers, because Luisa was mentioning this. When we talk about film, we know that film is dominated by Hollywood. We know that there is little space for national cinemas, increasingly, and this happens everywhere. The quotas, the number of foreign films that you can see in any given country is very low. In Ireland, it's almost impossible to watch films from continental Europe. Films from, I'm not talking about genre. Any film produced in Spain or in France or in Portugal, you would struggle to watch in a cinema in Ireland, which is an hour or 2 hours flight away from those countries. I'm not answering your question, Luis, but
no, that's fine.
Think about what you've said.
Okay, thank you.
¿Más preguntas? Yo tengo una pregunta. ¿Puedo hacerla en mi portuñol, Mariano? Tengo una pregunta sobre el libro El viaje maravilloso o maravilloso del maravilloso señor Snack. Noté que hay un subtítulo, comentario sobre el libro como una fantasía espiritista o alguna cosa como... entonces, mi pregunta es, ¿conoces la influencia o la fuerza del espiritismo en Argentina? Porque en Brasil es muy fuerte hasta hoy, pero en Argentina, ¿cómo?
No, I don't. I don't know anything about that at all. This is the early science fiction tradition in which things are mixed. The frontiers between science and these other fields of knowledge that today we would class as something else were a lot vaguer, and it's also the auge is the word in Spanish of positivismo, in which everything could be subjected to a scientific basis. Anthropology, this idea of cataloging people according to races, or even psychology. There was this feeling that these things could be approached scientifically. In the book, it's an excuse because the character travels to Mars in spirit only. Okay, his spirit manages to leave his physical body and go to Mars, which is a technique as well to solve the problem of the actual trip. How do you get to Mars as well? No, I don't know anything about spiritism. I'm afraid.
Mais perguntas? Bem, aproveitem. Podem perguntar sobre outros filmes que o professor Mariano não citou, talvez. Alfredo. Jorge Prudencio. Jorge Prudencio en el chat. Alfredo, debo ir a otra reunión. Gracias y saludos. Gracias, entonces,
Gracias.
Mariano.
Okay.
Jorge, desde Colombia. Es nuestro colega de Colombia.
Oh, cool.
Mariano, ¿y qué piensas de la película Fase 7 que había comentado?
Yes, I quería hablar de una película que se llama Fase 7, porque es muy relevante para hoy, porque es una película también posapocalíptica, post-pandémica. Este es otro tema muy frecuentado en la ciencia ficción, lo que estamos viviendo ahora. La idea de una pandemia, viral science fiction, it has been called. Viral science fiction, this subgenre of films that deal with a virus outbreak. Again, it's a model dominated by American and maybe British cinema, but there is one example. With everything, there's one example in Argentinian film. But the problem is that I have a DVD, which is in Ireland, so I can't get to it. I was unable to find any digital copies. Obviously, I'm being recorded. I only look for legal copies. Okay.
I found the trailer. Maybe. Oops. Sorry.
Yeah.
If you want me to screen the trailer, it's 1 minute.
No, I don't think there is any point. Just keep it in mind if you can find it, because it's an Argentinian take on the pandemic. But again, low budget. The film is set within a building, so it's not, again, any kind of panoramic or global view of an outbreak. The film is shot within the confines of one building, and maybe they go out into the street just once, okay? And it's about the links with the neighbors. Some of them become very violent in the quest for survival, and so on. And I haven't watched this film in about 2 years, so I don't remember it that well, but I wanted to watch it and bring it up today, but sorry, I couldn't. I guess hopefully what it can take from this today is that these films are situated within larger context, which I was saying this, within a context of science fiction production in general, but also there are connections between Latin American films. So if you're going to watch O Quinto Poder, then you can think about Invasión later on and see if there's any connection. So that's one thing you can take. And the other, well, a list of films that may or may not be of relevance if you're interested in, well, science fiction from Latin America, okay? What we can say is that there are not many. This is still a niche, no? I mean, something that's marginal within Latin America cinematic production. But if there are countries that have, more, well, that are more prolific, that would be, Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, probably. I'm not saying there's no science fiction films from Chile or from Colombia, but I'm sure that it's not going to be that many. Even Brazil, no? How many films? And again, we need to bear in mind that the definition will restrict or will let us include more or less films. But even if we use the less restrictive definitions, we'll have all these mixtures of science fiction comedies that are popular films. Nothing wrong with that, but they are probably less interesting as examples of
Mariano,
Yeah.
hay una pregunta de Fausto. Mariano, ¿crees que el realismo mágico fue una influencia importante para las nuevas generaciones del cine de ciencia ficción en Latinoamérica?
I'm not too sure what those generations would be, because the one thing about Argentina is that it doesn't have a film industry. It has a number of practices. One of them is the most important one is the National Film Institute, the INCA, which finances a big chunk of the films that are made. So there's no systematic production. So sometimes you have a film, maybe there's a 1 year in which 2 or even 3 films are released, and then for 5 years you don't have anything. So there's a very strong tradition in Argentinian literature of the fantastic as well, and not so much magical realism, which I think you see elsewhere. You see in the Caribbean, you see Mexico, you see in Colombia, of course, through Garcia Marquez. And not that much in Argentina, and probably not that much in Brazil either, no? Is there?
Actually, in Brazil, there are some good representatives. I was thinking of JJ Veiga and Murilo Rubião, perhaps, is the most famous.
Okay. But again, I don't think that there is an influence or that much of an influence. And there's something worse, which is there's this very strong tradition of the fantastic. Borges wrote more in that vein than in terms of science fiction. Julio Cortázar, Silvino Campo, there's a lot of that, but there's not much in terms of fantastic cinema, of fantasy on the fantastic in cinema. I would say there's more science fiction films from Argentina than films that have to do with the fantastic. What you have now is a very strong literary production of science fiction, mostly of dystopian novels. Very, very strong. I probably think you could count about 20 novels, if not more, produced within the last 20 years. That postulate future, post-apocalyptic or dystopian Argentinas. So sorry, I'm not answering any of these questions directly, but at least I'm trying to answer them like laterally.
Claro. Mais perguntas? Eu tenho uma pergunta, Mariano. My question actually is related to, I wanted to cite some of your articles and chapters during the introduction, because actually I think that there is a pattern in your research and a kind of a journey, very, very solid, consistent, because you are the author of South of the Future, an overview from 2008. Then you wrote Vox Politica, Acousmatic Voices in Argentine Science Fiction Film from 2011, right? Buenos Aires Dreaming. In 2013, you wrote Buenos Aires Dreaming, Chronopolitics, Memory and Dystopia in La Sonambula. And you are the author of one of the best chapters in that book, Red Alert, Marxist Approach to Science Fiction. The chapter is it's entitled "Rats and Revolution: Visions of the Lumpen Proletariat in Latin American Zombie Films" from 2016. So my question is that we see a lot of politics and science fiction, like merged in your works, and then you mentioned the films you brought us here, like Invasion and La Sonambula. They are all about politics in many ways, like allegories and parables, whatever. So my question is that, because you mentioned Carl Friedman too, science fiction as critical theory. So my question is a bit about how do you see the shape of Latin American science fiction as a whole, both literature, but especially film, especially cinema? Don't you see that Latin American science fiction, quite often the best science fiction films, they touch politics, like they're all about politics. They do have this kind of tendency to address, to tackle political issues.
Yeah. That reminds me of Frederick Jameson's phrase, much quoted, that every text in Latin America can be read as political allegory, which is it's an exaggeration. It's again this what we were talking about, this idea of saying, generalizations about everything that's not realistic in Latin America is magical realism. That's not quite true. Not everything is political allegory. yes, as Jameson says, but certainly there is a lot of that. And these films, maybe I'm drawn to this for my interest in social theory and politics, but I think that all the serious science fiction efforts in Argentinian film can be read along those lines: social commentary, social allegory. I mentioned, for example, the connections between science fiction and philosophy, but that's not that strong, at least in Argentina. You know, I'm thinking of those films, classic science fiction studies, which are less about politics and have to do more with reflections about the human condition or human nature. Recent examples, I don't know, the film Moon. Have you seen it? Yeah, I'm sure you have. Moon. Alfredo, you're on mute. Moon. By Duncan. I forgot the surname.
David Bowie's
son. David Bowie's son. Yeah.
Duncan
Jones. Or a film like Ex Machina. Okay.
Ex
that's
Machina.
A science fiction film. There's politics, because there's the politics of, well, patriarchy or feminism that are being alluded, and in the case of Moon, there's the politics of disposing of bodies, of clones, as if they were objects. So there's always a political element, but the emphasis is more on a kind of philosophical meditation on the human condition. Films like Solaris, those kinds of films are more philosophical. And I think that certainly in Argentina, you have the orientation towards the political and the allegorical. Would be interesting to see more films, more diversion, more examples, but it's a small film. But ultimately, I think, all science fiction, and certainly all dystopian fiction, can be read first as solutions to the present, yes, and then politically. This does not mean, as Friedman says, that they are necessarily critical, okay? Because Friedman, I think, goes a little bit too far in that sense that all films, science fiction films, are critical of established powers, of, certain, political tendencies. Some science fiction, exactly. Some science fiction films are very conservative, or even reactionary. Okay, so certainly you have that, but that doesn't mean that they are not. But they are political. Yes.
Okay, great. So we are approaching our limit. Like we're at 4:10, maybe quarter past 4. We're going to finish. So, any more questions? Pergunta? Pode perguntar. Pode perguntar em português, espanhol.
¿Puedo preguntar en español?
Sí,
claro. ¿Me entiendes? Bueno,
Claro.
no conozco mucho de la ficción científica contemporánea de Argentina. Pero en Brasil tenemos ahora como que una ola de producciones distópicas de todos los tipos. Son muchísimas.
¿Cine o literatura?
Cine, más cine.
Ajá. Okay.
Cines que no son basados en literatura,
Uh-huh.
son muy creativos. Por eso estoy haciendo en español, porque no sé mismo cómo traducirte, pero se habla mucho de una estética de la gambiarra. No sé cómo traducir eso. No sé cómo traducir eso en español, incluso en inglés. Pero en Brasil, gambiarra es algo que haces cuando no tienes el material adecuado para hacer algo.
Uh-huh.
Es cualquier tipo de material.
Yeah.
Yo tengo una, perdón, pero yo tengo una amiga americana que nosotros hablamos de basura punk, que es...
Ay, bárbaro, basura punk.
Basura punk.
Basura punk. Entonces tenemos a Dirley Queiroz, ¿no? Con Blanco, no sé si conoces algo de él.
Sí, Alfredo me ha dado una copia, sí.
Hay algunas producciones de un colectivo de Ceará, del colectivo Alumbramiento, que se llama... Así, hay muchas.
Sí.
Incluso Bacurau tiene algo de eso.
Sí, totalmente, estoy de acuerdo.
¿Podrías hablarme algo, si hay algo que se pueda hacer una comparación con las películas argentinas? No consigo acordarme ahora.
No hay porque no tenemos esto. Tenemos en Argentina, como dije, esta especie de revival de literatura distópica, pero no esto que mencionas tú. Casi en los últimos 2 o 3 años no he visto nada. Sí, algunos cortos de ciencia ficción, pero muy poco en términos de largometraje. Pero no, nada de esto que mencionas, lamentablemente no.
No sé, pero creo que son tradiciones culturales distintas, ¿no?
Sí, son como olas, waves, me parece a veces. Una película inspira a otra y se hacen estas olas. Y esto lo he visto en literatura, donde hay una ola de literatura gótica, fantástica en Argentina, de escritores jóvenes de 40 años, y una ola de esta literatura distópica, mucho en literatura y poco en cine. Y tal vez dentro de unos años empiece a haber una serie de películas y poco de literatura. Así que no lo sé, pero por supuesto que influye mucho, bueno, esto de ahora la pandemia, pero en los últimos años, cuestiones de la industria. Es cierto que ahora se puede hacer una película con muy poco o con nada. Así que me parece que hay mucho también de azar en eso.
Gracias. Thank you.
No, gracias a ti.
Mais perguntas? Vamos aproveitar os últimos...
I'm happy, Alfredo, I think my email address is somewhere there. So feel free to email me later, as I said. And if you have the chance of traveling and eventually if we return some kind of normality, si regresamos a una vida normal en la que la gente pueda viajar y ustedes están haciendo doctorados sobre utopía, distopía o ciencia ficción, tenemos el centro de investigación que les mencionaba y si quieren pasarse una temporada, un par de meses en Limerick, están invitados, tendrían que enviar una propuesta y hablarlo con la institución, pero como decía, eso es factible. You won't find a strong library of Latin American texts, but you will find a good library in relation to utopia and science fiction in Limerick.
Eu gostaria, Mariano, se me permite, até enfatizar isso, porque, na verdade, nós, eu e o professor Mariano, temos esse acordo de cooperação entre o Rallah Center, da Universidade de Limerick, e a Unicamp, o programa de pós-graduação em multimeios. Então, assim, quem estiver assistindo e, eventualmente, tiver planos, pretensões de fazer algum estágio de pesquisa em Limerick, é um local em que é bastante produtivo por conta do professor Mariano Paz, do Rallah Center for Utopian Studies, né? Mariano, como é o nome do professor que não leciona mais lá? Tom Moylan. Sim, por favor.
No, Tom Moylan, I mean, there's 2 texts that are essential or canonical. You may disagree. I disagree with what he says, but one of them is Scraps of the Untainted Sky, utopia, dystopia, and science fiction. That's kind of one of the foundational, works. He's a friend of Darko Subin. He's a friend of Lyman Towers Sargent, so he works a lot. But that's his main book. But then he's published extensively, mostly on the connection between science fiction and the utopical, which tends to be overlooked. We tend to, look at science fiction and dystopia, myself included. I do that. But there's a whole dimension of science fiction and utopia, which is utopia in the positive sense, which is very interesting as well.
Então, é um local, então, que já existe essa cultura formada e tem acadêmicos pesquisadores ativos, como o professor Mariano Paz. Então, fica aqui o convite para que vocês nos procurem, quem tiver interesse, assim como os alunos pesquisadores de Limerick, né, que tiverem interesse em fazer pesquisa aqui no Cone Sul, não é? Mercosul, Brasil, né, Argentina, Uruguai, também podem vir e ficar conosco na Unicamp. Então, fica repetido o convite. Luísa, você ia falar?
Não, mas mesmo na pandemia, esse convite está aberto? Como estão as coisas? In the pandemic?
Yeah, but hopefully this will finish, no? At some stage. We're talking about in a year's time.
I hope so.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. We don't know it, but it's conceivable. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that 2021 maybe things get a little bit kind of better, but the fact that Professor Mariano Paz, he's been already here at Unicamp. Mm-hmm. I've been to Limerick, and we look forward to having him again here at in São Paulo, Campinas, at Unicamp. So it's something, it's a long term collaboration, right? So
so we're probably thinking of 2020. I don't think anything will happen. Even funding will be frozen until at least for another year, but maybe from 2022, something like that. Hopefully, Anyway, I mean, the option is there, and I know it will be expensive because you need to pay for your flights and your accommodation. If we could get funding, that would be great, but we're constantly looking into that with Alfredo. But as you know, it's very limited. We'll see what happens.
Can I share your professional email, Mariano? Can I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'll share, and right now I'll do that. And
yeah, because I'll have to go, but feel free to email me. Okay?
Yeah.
If anybody wants to know anything. Okay?
Sim, eu vou então colocar aqui o e-mail do professor Mariano Paz, o e-mail institucional. E, bom, mais uma última pergunta, last minute question, 30 seconds, no? Eu vou ter que pôr o e-mail, eu estou com um problema técnico, vou passar o e-mail depois para todos, tá? Por e-mail, tá bom? Bom, então, se não tivermos mais perguntas, né, eu gostaria de agradecer muitíssimo, thank you so much, Mariano, for being so generous and sharing your thoughts with us. Agradeço muito mais uma vez e foi uma excelente tarde e excelente aula e espero que continuemos em contato e passando a pandemia possamos nos encontrar e talvez até esse próprio grupo aqui possamos nos ver pessoalmente, né?
Yeah. Thanks, obrigado. Thank you all for listening, for having the patience. It's a pleasure. And yeah, that's all. Yeah, thank you, and feel free to email me if you have any questions.
Muito obrigado, Mariano. Então,
and good luck with the course, and you'll be science fiction experts by the time it's finished. You're in great hands.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
So keep well.
All right. Bye, boss. Gostamos.
Bye. Saludos.
Adiós.
Tchau, tchau. Adiós, Mariano. Obrigado.